Greetings, citizens of the world. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, it devastated the island and left the U.S. territory in a humanitarian crisis, prompting the federal government and other volunteers to rush in and offer assistance. Puerto Rico wasn't exactly a paradise or shining example of government efficiency prior to the storm. Instead, it was a mismanaged bureaucratic nightmare with neglected infrastructure and an overdependence on aid from others, specifically the federal government. President Donald Trump alluded to this in a series of tweets Thursday. Puerto Rico survived the hurricanes. Now a financial crisis looms largely of their own making, says Cheryl Atkerson. A total lack of accountability, say the governor. Electric and all infrastructure was disaster before hurricanes. Congress to decide how much to spend. We cannot keep FEMA, the military and the first responders, who have been amazing, under the most difficult circumstances, in PR forever. Of course, the media, Democrats and even some Republicans accused Trump of being heartless, claiming he was proposing the abandonment of the poor Puerto Rican people in their dire time of need, in essence, leaving them to die, according to the Washington Post. Unfortunately for the president's critics, Trump is 100% correct in his assessment that Puerto Rico already had pre-existing problems that were simply compounded by the destructive storm. He's also correct about the fact that federal assistance above the norm, such as the extended deployment of FEMA, the military and emergency first responders, as well as the dispersal of additional taxpayer funds, cannot be carried on forever and must end at some point. The provision of federal aid with no conditions or limits, such as bailouts, will do little to help the Puerto Rican people in the long run, and in fact will remove the incentive to responsibly help themselves, as they know Uncle Sam will always be there to take care of everything for them. President Trump is not the first U.S. leader to hold that view, but merely the latest in a long line of former presidents and founders, as noted by economist Walter Williams in an essay titled "Charity Not a Proper Function of the American Government," written in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina's terrible swamping of New Orleans. Indeed, former President Grover Cleveland vetoed a bill in 1867 that would have provided federal aid to farmers suffering a severe drought in Texas. I find no warrant for such an appropriation in the Constitution, and I do not believe that the power and the duty of the general government ought to be extended to the relief of individual suffering which is in no manner properly related to the public service or benefit, he said then. The friendliness and charity of our countrymen can always be relied upon to relieve their fellow citizens in misfortune. This has been repeatedly and quite lately demonstrated, he added. Federal aid in such cases encourages the expectation of paternal care on the part of the government and weakens the sturdiness of our national character, while it prevents the indulgence among our people of that kindly sentiment and conduct which strengthens the bonds of a common brotherhood. Cleveland often repeated that same line, "I can find no warrant for such an appropriation in the Constitution," throughout the duration of his administration as he vetoed hundreds of spending bills put forward by Congress. His line could very well have been adapted from that of former President Franklin Pierce, who upon vetoing a bill to aid the mentally ill in 1854 stated, "I cannot find any authority in the Constitution for public charity." Even Founding Father James Madison, who objected to appropriations intended to aid French refugees, stated, "I cannot undertake to lay my finger on the article of the Constitution which granted a right to Congress of expending, on objects of benevolence, the money of their constituents." And no, liberals, the promote the general welfare clause of the Constitution was not intended to serve as a blank check that would allow for Congress to benevolently spend taxpayer money on anything they saw fit. Rather, it was meant only to relate to what was specifically enumerated within their realm by the Constitution, as per both Madison and Thomas Jefferson. Critics will nevertheless continue to criticize and accuse Trump of being hateful toward Puerto Rico, but in reality he would be helping them by stepping back and allowing them room to help themselves. Please share this article on Facebook and Twitter so everyone can see that President Trump is actually right to let Puerto Rico know that federal tax dollars